Off. We are back with another week. Make some more money up in here. If I angle this correctly, then the guard tool can be the pace. Okay, it's not going to work too far. Okay, we are up to chapter 6, which very, very excited. We're going to talk. We just finished the Midah of Zahirus, and we're going to begin the chapter of Zerizus. And really, really, the reason why the Ramchal starts with the Midah of Zahirus is because when a person loses their sense of awareness for themselves, then there's nothing that can be done. As in all growth, any media you want to work on, it always starts with being able to gauge where you need to work on and where you're deficient in and what's your progress, your tracking. If a person is just not aware, if you're living in life in ignorance of your own experience, there is no way you're going to be able to work on anything. Every success and failure you have will happen totally by chance, like a leaf in the wind being blown around. Everything else will be steering it except for your own seichel, your own decision, your own bechira. So essentially, it's a non-starter. But now that we've established self-awareness and the ability to be able to watch and survey one's actions and affairs, we can dive into the next midah for the next 4 chapters. That we're going to dissect the midah of zerizus. I don't have alacrity. I don't have a good English word to describe what zerizus is. It is, I mean, he'll describe it, but I guess it's acting with haste, not in a rush, but with a sense of urgency. It's acting with a sense of urgency. I guess that's the best way to do it. So let's dive in and let's again, this is what someone mentioned Chavas Talmidim recently, right? And you also look at the progression of Chavas Talmidim. First, he talks about understanding the power of being a yid, which essentially is self-awareness, students' first steps towards change, and then they dive into attacking laziness and being lethargic. The interesting thing is that that is really what Zrizos is meant to fight against, as in when a person works on their Zrizos, they're fighting directly against laziness and being lethargic. And so it's interesting that they have similar roadmaps, if you look at it conceptually, in both of those Sfarim, which I think are my two favorite Sifrei Musar. Um, they just approach it in different angles over here. If Shelley was here, she would highlight because I learn with her, Chovas Atamina with her every week. Okay. But those of you who were in the Chabura last year, remember, we talked about laziness and being lethargic. That's basically what Zerizus is out set out to accomplish. So, after vigilance, after Zahirus, Yavoy Zerizus, then comes alacrity, comes Zerizus. Vigilance centers on the negative commandments, while Zerizus focuses on the positive one in accordance with what I've said. Sur Meirav Asay Tov, David Amelech, and Tehillim Sur Meirav Asay Tov. So that's an incredible insight, and he puts it so beautifully. Zahira, self-awareness, is the awareness to be able to prevent yourself from falling into sin. It's watching your conduct and observing your conduct to hold yourself accountable when it comes to the mitzvahs lo saseh, the things that you are not meant to do. However, right, like unless you're like Yosef Atzadik, who's running out of Potiphar's house, it's Zrizos against away from the. But typically, Zrizos really means really refers to going out and doing well. And if you see the progression of Sur Meirav Tov, one of the most simple yet brilliant lines in all of Tehillim that David has, and very, very nogea to character development, is Sur Meirav Tov, which is a two-pronged approach. Not working on yourself is not enough when we're talking about just doing good for yourself and taking on good things. There also has to be working and focusing on eradicating the negative things about a person that exists. Give me 1 second. Just write this down. When you have a thought. Da, 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 da. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Phone, and we're back. Okay, so Sur Ravi Asay Tov in that order, as in if you want Asay Tov, if you want to do good, then you have to Sur Ra. The Piazetzna in Chavas Talmidim, he puts it beautifully. He says, "How are you going to usher into a king into a room that's dirty? And if you want to make yourself into a mikdash, that's really mikdash, then how are you going to bring godliness into the vessel that is you when you're all full of schmutz? So if a person just goes out and starts taking upon themselves mitzvahs, but they haven't worked on the negative character traits that exist within them, then everything beautiful that they try to bring in is going to become schmutzy, it's going to become dirty. It's a two-pronged approach. And while a person can do it simultaneously, which I would suggest you should do it simultaneously, you should do both work on the things you need to eradicate from your character, but you should also try to amplify the things, the kochot that Hashem gave you. But David HaMelech is saying, Somer Rav Tov in that order, that a person has to turn away from the bad and do good. Turn away from the bad means that I have to be able to recognize what's bad, i.e., Zahirus. And the Aseh Tov refers to go out and proactively do good. So it's said beautifully. The concept of zrizas involved the swiftness in one's approach to the mitzvah and its speedily consummation, which basically means the two elements of it is how quickly do you take advantage of opportunities that come your way, right? It's like in shul. The moment that a guy, I mean, whatever, you can mostly girls here, but like the tefillin box drops on the floor and you hear the clunking on the floor. And then there's this moment, it's like a wild, Western movie where you're like in this gun battle where everyone's looking at each other, wah, 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 and like you make eye contact and everyone's standing around to see who's going to be the first one to lunge and go like pick it up. And in that moment right there, you got that mitzvah sitting right there for you. And if you hesitate, you lose, you know? But that's what it is, right? It's how quickly do you begin when you see an opportunity come along for a mitzvah? Boom, who grabs it first? But then he says something which is incredibly deep as well. How quickly are you in the consummation of it? How are you working towards its completion? And again, just because I love it, to make the reference to Chavas Talmidim, right? He says that laziness is sort of the initial action towards doing something, while being lethargic is you're schlepping your way through it. So someone who's quick to begin tasks but never actually quite finishes them, right? Every time they're inspired, they get up to the first one there, whatever, but they don't stay consistent with it. So these are two elements of the physical lazy and the spiritual lazy. But nonetheless, okay, so zrizos means to combat both of these in both elements. How quickly are you to initiate, to take opportunity to complete to start a mitzvah and then its completion? Similarly, what our blessed with our sages of blessed memory have said in Psachim. This line is a line in the Gemara, but this is really what it means to be a Jew. Zrizim makdim in the mitzvos. There are certain lines in Torah that like are very important to always hold on to. This is one of them. If you have the Sefer in front of you, it's worth underlining it. Zrizim makdim in the mitzvos, which means that the way that Hashem expects a Jew to do mitzvos is in the matter of zrizos. That is the way in which the Jewish person is meant to work and operate. That is what we are. The body, the guf, which comes from the ground, which its natural, its disposition is to be lazy and dormant, like the element of earth, and our neshama is filled with this, ability to move, and we're caught in this back and forth between the body and the soul. Right? Zrizis is the way that we practice it because it's against our nature, and it's literally the way that a yid is supposed to conduct themselves. Yeah, Mashiach.
Oh, where can I find that? Like, where do I underline?
Gemara Pesachim in Daled Aleph. Now, do you have this? Couldn't help myself. Do you have the Sefer in front of you, the green, like the one we're using?
Yes, 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 yes.
So it's on page 37. If you
Yeah.
look in Hebrew, it's worth it to know the Hebrew for this. But it's the first paragraph, at the end of the first paragraph. And the little source in the brackets there, it says Psachim Daled
Oh,
Aleph, and then in quotation. Zrizim Makdim in the Mitzvos. So to share just a beautiful Dvar Torah from the Sfas Emes that I heard from, um, I think it's Rebbe Kiva Tatz. I want to say it right. I think it's Rebbe Kiva Tatz. But he says it b'shem the Sfas Emes. He says like this. He says that when we left Mitzrayim, the Jewish people left Egypt to our freedom. We left in a matter. The word is used bichi pazon in a haste, like very very quickly, right? So, and we learn out from Chazal that if the Jewish people would have stayed even 1 second longer, they would have been there stuck forever. And the question is really, like, if the Jewish people didn't leave in that moment, that exact moment when they had to leave Mitzrayim, if they stayed another 30 seconds, it would have, like, they would have been stuck there forever. Like, really? Come on, that seems like a little bit excessive, no? So Zaktis Vas Emes so beautifully, he says like this. He says the problem was like, no, of course they would have gone out 30 seconds later. Problem is, it wouldn't have been Bichi Pazon. And if you know what leaving Egypt was for the Jewish people, this was the inception of the Jewish people. And in the same way that the inception of an embryo, when it's being birthed, its DNA is being laid out in that moment. Meaning that if you have brown eyes or blue eyes or, I would say hair color, but depending on the week, it's changing for most girls. That whatever your natural look is, why do you look that way? It was because the DNA was laid in the inception on your creation. That's when it was laid out. So the Jewish people, the inception of the Jewish people means that their nature is going to be however they conduct themselves in that very moment, meaning that if they had waited 30 seconds, the problem is they would have waited 30 seconds and we wouldn't be a nation of Zrizas. We are our natural disposition, what we are as Jews, we are people, our neshamas are that of Zrizos. That's we're embodying that midah. Zrizim makdim mitzvos. That was the intention in which Hashem had it to be carried out. So when we became a nation, we did it in the context of Zrizos, and therefore everything that we do in life, and it's success for the whole part. I mean, it goes far beyond Judaism, success in general. Those who the way we can translate it into like practical application is work ethic. What is a person's work ethic? A person's work ethic means they're on top of time management. It means that they get things done. They don't put off things. They don't procrastinate. These are the things. Procrastination is the poison of an unsuccessful person. People who put things off simply miss opportunities. And the parallel, read any, business book that talks about success. The parallel in terms of how to be successful as a Yid, as a Jew, is the exact same thing. We have to be operating that when there's an opportunity in front of us, boom, we go at it right away. We don't schlep our feet. We don't waste our time. We are a people of Zrizas, and there you have it as we're the way that we're supposed to do the mitzvos, Zrizim makdim la mitzvos. The way to do the mitzvos is through Zrizos. Okay, so that's as an introduction, us the Jewish people, Zrizos. Let's go weiter here on page 37, the second paragraph. For the reason for this is just as one requires great incentive and foresight to escape the traps of the evil inclination and to flee evil, thereby preventing the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, dominating over us and its premation of our deeds. One likewise needs great insight and foresight to grasp the mitzvahs to fulfill them without losing this opportunity. And now also you see why Zehirus, by the way, is precedes Zrizas. As in, because what's going to motivate a person to go after something so aggressive? When you recognize the magnitude of the opportunity in front of you, it changes the way that you operate, right? If you're going to miss that flight and there's no other flights out of the country for the next 4 years, you are getting there bright and early. It doesn't matter what you have to go through. When you recognize the magnitude of something in front of you, nothing holds you back from going out there. And again, Zahiros is going to add to that element. It precedes it. You have to know exactly what the context of you versus vis-a-vis the actual mitzvah in front of you. For in the same way that the Yetzer Hara works its influence and endeavors by subterfuge to lure man into the net of transgression, it also attempts to prevent him from fulfilling the mitzvahs and take away that from him. Why? Because as a person, I mean, that's his job in a nutshell. The Yetzer Hara's job is to prevent you from becoming the best you can be and conquering over the Yetzer Hara. And the best way to possibly do that is by preventing you from acting with Zrizos. The Yetzer Hara, I mean, the tools that he uses, right? What does the Yetzer Hara do? He takes the deficiencies of you. What do you struggle with? I'm such a procrastinator. Yetzer Hara goes, bingo, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put those little thoughts in your head, constantly. I'm like, okay, listen, I can do it later. One of the biggest, I think, enemies of, of, uh, of not growing and not being the best you can be, or losing your connection with Yiddishkeit in general, is trivializing things, making things seem like they're not such big of a deal. When I talk to students who go off to who don't go to yeshiva and seminary, go off to college, and the ones that care, not the ones that are just like woohoo sorority, but like the ones who like actually care, and they're like, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna go to Chabad once a week, as if like that's what's acceptable for an 18-year-old. You got to grow up. But like to them, like the ones who actually care. So the way that I frame it is the real danger of going to college is that being in an environment where everything around you just doesn't seem like such a big deal. Where you're like, hey, I'm gonna commit to putting on tefillin every single day. I'm gonna commit to keeping kosher, whatever it is. And then you get there, and the Yetzer Hara is like, wow, this is like a layup for me. What's the big deal? Everyone's going to the game. Like, and what do you see? I, 99.9% of the time, and that's not an exaggeration of a statistic there. What do you see? You see that over time, people are just like, okay, like it's not that deep anymore. That's like the bread and butter of the Yetzer Hara. What the Ramchal is saying is the way to defeat him is by fighting back in the same sense of like, no, it does matter. There is a tremendous sense of urgency always that I'm not risking losing my soul, my place in this world and in the next. So if one becomes lax and indolent and does not act rigorously in pursuing them and in holding on to them, he will find himself empty and devoid of them. By the way, and that's the whole reason why, at least in NCSY, we try to generate inspiration or try to have a recharge, right? The Shabbaton next week, for what? For what? Because if we don't have a Shabbaton next week and we allow people to just wait from fall all the way or from gap year weekend all the way till March by Han Shabbaton, then they lost the juice. It's just like, it's not that, yeah, I don't care as much as I did 2 months ago. So it's about sort of recharging them and creating that sense of urgency. So notice how our human nature is characterized by being lethargic. There you go. Since the physical element of dust from which man is formed is coarse, for this reason, man is not enthusiastic at all about work and effort. This is our natural state. The body comes from the ground, and the ground is the element of earth, which means to chill, right? I'm an earth sign, so I struggle with laziness. Earth is stable, it's stability, it doesn't move, right? Fire, water, air, these are all things that are, earth just wants to stay dormant. Now it's foundation, it's solid, it's rock solid, it doesn't get knocked around. That's all great. But laziness is the negative part of it, where it just doesn't want to do anything. So that's where your body is. The body wants nothing to do. By the way, the body would do nothing all day without stimuli. Now there's physical ones, right? Like the need to breathe, use the bathroom, to sleep. You do those things because your body demands it of you. But anything that requires of any growth whatsoever is not in the body's nature. First of all, the body would never do exercise, ever. The body hates exercise. You know who loves exercise? It's a matter of the soul. It's a matter of motivation. It's a matter of, hey, I want to look good. I want to be healthy. But the body doesn't want any of that. The body's natural state is, I love nothing more than sitting on the couch, eating Takis, watching Netflix. That is, if I could just do that for all of eternity, I would love that. But that's the body. To be able to serve the Creator, may His name be blessed, a person must overcome his own nature, and he must do it with zrizas. Zrizas is the antidote to the body. The way to fight against the nature of the body is by exercising zrizas. If he allows his lethargy to dominate him, he will surely not succeed. And this is what the Tana said in Pirkei Avos, very famous Mishnah: "Be bold as a leopard, light as an eagle, fleet as a deer, and courageous as a lion, to do the will of your Father in heaven." And the Mefarshim go into what each one of them means in terms of being bold as a leopard. Means don't be lazy because it's comfortable to be hidden and like, okay, I don't want to say brachas in front of my friends. I think we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. Being bold as a leopard means that you should flex your Judaism where you are. Don't use your surrounding environment as an excuse to put that away, right? Light as an eagle, meaning that you shouldn't become too dormant. You should be able to be, loose with it. Don't get too ingrained in where you are. Fleet as a deer, to be able to avoid and run away from the Yetzer Hara when the Yetzer Hara is right. If there's some sort of spiritual danger, that you're able to run as if a deer is running away from its prey. And courageous as a lion, to be, what does it mean to be a gibor? To be strong over your heart is to fight against the Yetzer Hara with everything that you can, to do the will of your Father. A person has to have all these approaches to be able to serve Hashem properly, but they all have an element of zrizas connected to them. And among those things that need to be enforcement, the sages of blessed memory included Torah and good deeds. That's how we exercise zrizos. And this is explicitly written in Yeshayahu: "Be strong and courageous to observe, to do in your, I'm sorry, to observe, I mean your observance, to do according to which the whole Torah which you've been commanded by Moshe, my servant. Indeed, a person needs great strength to transform his nature so completely." And again, this is not a foreign concept to anybody. Anybody who you see, who's like managed to even be disciplined. Let's say talk about like the diet and exercise. Someone who was like, transform themselves. They used to be very heavy and they were able to, not cheat by using Ozempic, but like really got themselves together. They exercise tremendous discipline. But why don't people stay in the gym? Why do people go and after a few days they quit? It requires a tremendous amount of discipline, courage, right? The consistency. There's so much there. And zrizos at the end of the day. But this is the way to serve Hashem. In the same way, if a person wants to be successful, they need to be consistent, right? This is like the secret to success: comes consistently to learn and earn. Come every single week. If this is the where you're getting your fill from Torah learning, whatever it is, coming consistent. Those are the people you're going to see in the long term who are going to ultimately be successful. But that's what a person needs to do. Shlomo, observing the evil of indolence, shows something just like to sit around and do nothing, the great damage that has caused, he repeatedly cautioned against this, and he said, "A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands in order to rest, and your poverty will arrive as suddenly as one who walks hurriedly in the deficiency, as fast as a man who shields the king at war." For an indolent person, even though he does no harm actively, nonetheless harms himself through his passivity. And then Shlomo Mishlei said, "One who is lax is in his work is the brother of the master of destruction." We'll talk about who's the original master of destruction in that context, but a little sleep, a little slumber, and your poverty will arise. It's obviously a metaphor, but it's not a metaphor. because at the end of the day, all these principles are directly parallel to the elements of success in general. If a person is going to have a successful career, all these elements, all these principles to the T, they apply. If a person wants to get through school, you have to be patient, resilient. You have to work with, you have to be courageous, disciplined. You have to get through it all. You have to take opportunities when they come. Your work ethic needs to be, if you want to rise to the top, you want to be noticeable. You want to be looked at as someone who's like, wow, I want that person on my team. Then your work ethic is rock solid. You're somebody who has this life to them. You're asking questions. You're proactive. It's being passive. Those people who are just like very passive, who are okay with just being average, they have no ambition in life. They have no drive. There's people they become average. You don't see successful, dynamic like people who are just blah. You know what I mean? Like I look around sometimes. I'm looking at certain kids. I'm just like, God, what's gonna be with you? Like, what's gonna happen? You're so like, ugh, you know? What's gonna get you to like break through those emotional walls and get you like moving in life in general? Person has to be very disciplined with these things. So in general, just in life, if you want to win at life, you have to be someone who operates with Cerezos in a big way. Um, so it's not that he proactively, and this is again, this is the ikra. A lot of young, very immature minds don't understand this. I'm not doing bad. I'm not proactively going out doing bad. Hey, I could be doing drugs, mom. It's that you're passive. Being passive and letting go opportunities is just as bad. Coasting is just as bad, right? Those people who like it's actually probably more dangerous. The kids who like fall off and like you try to like, hey, come back. Yeah, we haven't seen you in a while, kind of thing. But there's always those kids who coast through NCSY, as in they've been in NCSY for 4 years, and from the day they entered as a freshman to like graduate as a senior, there is no identifiable change or element of it. It's just coasting, just passive, passing up on all opportunities. That's not success. Also, that's really sad. It's really unfortunate. You know, like almost like apathy. It's like nebuch beyond. Being passive can be incredibly destructive because we are a mitzvahs aseh that Hashem wants us to do means that we have to proactively go out and do it. If a person is passive, they're going to miss out not only on their avodas Hashem, but also a lot of opportunities that can come along in their life. So even though he is not the destructive agent who directly commits the evil, there is not much difference between them. In reality, he is the brother, and they are equally as harmful. So he's talking about like um, someone who goes out and does something destructive versus someone's lazy or lethargic. Again, they're going through the motions because they've been conditioned and indoctrinated to live a certain way. So they show up to things and they check the boxes, right? They dive in, they learn, they do mitzvahs because they were raised that way. So they're checking the boxes off, and they're incredibly passive, and there's no heart, there's no emotional energy or effort that's being put into their avodas Hashem. He says, even though you're not proactively doing things that are harm, you're the brother of the master of destruction. Your end is going to be just the same. Right? Lacking, that brings me recalls the story of the books that the guy who died, he goes up to Shemayim. He was a good guy. He did his mitzvahs, Torah, lived an average life. He gave tzedakah. He did what he had to do. And he gets up to heaven, and Hashem goes to him. He's the minister angels are all giving him like a mean face, and he's just like, "Whoa, what's going on over here?" Like, I was a good guy. What happened? And one of the angels turns and says, "Did you read these farm, this set of farm?" He goes, "No, I didn't know I was supposed to." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, I didn't. I don't even know what those are." They go, "Yeah, because you were supposed to write them, and because you decided to be average and not take advantage of opportunities and not become the best you can be, the world is forever going to be deprived of this farm that you were supposed to write and bring into the world." It's an intense story, but again, like if you think you're not going to be held accountable, who decides what your potential is? Potential. The constant reminder that you've yet to accomplish anything, right? Talking about your potential. Who decides what your potential is? It's Hashem. You didn't get to pick that. Hashem comes out there and says, I know what you're capable of because I made you. Haha. So I made you, I gave you the kochot, and then I'm deciding what is your potential. And if you decide to live your entire life, I may have asked him, you show up 120 and you're just gonna be like, oh, yeah, probably should have done something a little bit. Like, you're not going to be held accountable for that? Are you joking? Every single one of you, as a Jew who's alive today, is an investment from Hashem, holding your neshama, waiting for the right time and place in life to put you into the world as his agent to go make a difference. And you decided to take the easy route, to be an average Jew. Okay, so I'm not going to change the world. I'm going to focus on my immediate family or my just in my community. And okay, fine, that's great if you're not capable of doing more. But if you have Zahiros and you recognize that you are capable of doing more, and there's that little voice and calling inside of you, when you sit around, what happens? You get older and you kill that voice because it demands of you, there are certain people who don't want to come back on Yeshiva TJJ the following summer because they know that if they go there, they're going to be like infused with this drive to want to do more and they just want to like they don't want to deal with that pressure. Well, the pressure. Who's putting pressure on you? Oh, you mean your neshama? Because Hashem gave you a soul that knows, you know? Yeah, I've seen it the year, and I also see it with people who detach themselves from NCSY because of it, because it's not. I don't want to surround myself with people who are always like trying to motivate me to do better. It's like you hear yourself talking, it's crazy,
Someone
you
someone
know.
just told me I don't want to go to seminary because I know that it will change me and I want to stay how I am but learn, but I don't want to change. I don't want to start wearing sneas. It's like what?
It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. I do get it, right? I think it's horrible, but I do get it. But there's no free meals here. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going to the same place. You're going to be standing in front of your creator. What will you have to say to him? You know? Too bad. Bikesh Yaakov Lev Shei Bashalva. Yaakov got back to Eretz Yisrael from Lavan. He wanted to sit, he wanted to chill. And too bad, Hashem said, I'm sorry, the time to chill is when you die. You're in this world, you're required to work. You're gonna have things to deal with. You know what I mean? You can't, I mean, you can try. You can try to pull a Yonah and run away and go on the ship, but Hashem's just gonna find his way. And then when you have that awakening later in life, it's like, okay, well, you ended up here anyway, hopefully, if God has mercy. But then what'd you do with the last 10 years of your life? It's not worth it. Then you have to play catch up your whole life. It's terrible. So probing further into the ills of being indolent, Shlomo Melech depicts what occurs and emerges daily before our eyes. In Mishlei, he says, again, Shlomo Melech, the smartest man to ever live, the author of Mishlei and Koheles, I passed by the field of an indolent person and the vineyard of an unintelligent person, and it was overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with thistles. Those are like the brush stuff. And when I beheld all of this, I considered it well. I looked up and I received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, and your poverty will arise. You know? And nature, by the way, nature is a good reflective of this. If you don't cut the hedges and you don't tame it, whatever, it becomes into a crazy wild brush. That's just what it is. Your poverty. And I guess the metaphor of poverty is, you're poor in your deeds, in your merits, and what you could accomplish here, right? Make it rich monetarily, but spiritually as well, which is worth a lot more. But aside from the simple meaning of this, which sets out the truth about what happens to the field of a person who is idle, the sages of blessed memory explain this matter with a beautiful midrash. And this is what they have said. In the Akut Shimoni says, and it was overgrown with thorns, refers to one who seeks interpretation of the Torah passage and does not find it. Its surface was covered, means that because he has not toiled over them, words of Torah, he sits in judgment and declares the pure to be impure and the impure to be pure, thereby undermining the enactments of Torah scholarship. Okay, he's going to go into a real good musser coming up on this page, like hardcore. But basically, what the midrash says over here, how they're defining it, meaning that when a person is lax in their avodas Hashem and they don't take the time to really be diligent in understanding what I'm meant to do, because like, oh, so much halacha, what is that, or you hear something in passive, or like, you don't really you run with something without having a good grasp on it. What it will end up happening is you can be living your entire life literally practicing Judaism wrong, by misunderstanding or not clarifying what the halacha was. What the Ramchal is bringing this midrash, I think, is because he's saying at the root of this is laziness. As in, if you were diligent, if you were really passionate and aggressive about figuring out what the MS is, then you would come to that understanding. But if you were lazy, or you sat in a shir and you heard something, you didn't want to ask a follow-up question, so you decided to interpret it on your own. You came sense to what you thought it meant, and then you lived your life by that. And what's even worse, I've even heard, even for myself, I've heard kids quote me, that because they heard me say something, and then they're doing something that's like, no, I would never say that they should do that. But that's happened to me before. So it's an element of laziness as well. I don't want to further along with this because of whatever reason, and then a person leads themselves to practicing in their avodas Hashem wrong. We've all been there. We're all guilty of this to some degree. Even now, even in my own life, it's like I revisit certain halachas that I thought were a given, and I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know why I had that impression. So it's important that you want to be living your life to the best way possible. Um, but again, there's no excuses for that type of thing. Okay, what will his punishment be? It's gonna get a little spicy here, so buckle up. So Shlomo Melech explains this in Koheles, one who breaches a fence will be bitten by a snake. This means that an indolent person's ills do not occur all at once, but gradually, without his knowledge and his awareness. For he is drawn from one ill to the next until he finds himself drowning in the ultimate evil. Initially, he merely cuts down his efforts, and this has a negative effect on his Torah learning. And because of this deficiency, he will find that the comprehension will elude him in his subsequent learning. As in, very slowly, it will creep in that a person is a little bit lax here, a little bit lax there. I'll miss one session, I'll do this. If his ills would only end there, it wouldn't be bad enough. However, they get progressively worse. In his desire, nonetheless, to clarify a passage in a particular chapter, he will adduce views that go against halacha, and he will be corrupt the truth and pervert it. He will violate the rabbinic decrees and undermine their enactments, and his end, like those who breach the fence, will be destruction. Shlomo Melech says in Mishlei, and when I beheld all this, I considered it well. I contemplated this matter and realized the magnitude of the evil within. It's like a poison that gradually, progressively spreads, and its actions are not apparent until death takes hold. And this is what I've said in Mishlei. A little sleep, and your poverty will arrive as suddenly as one who walks hurriedly, and your deficiency as fast as a man who shields the king at war. Okay, so I'm gonna flip it a little bit, right? He's using the example of somebody who's lax in terms of their understanding of Torah for their avodas Hashem, and then violates halacha. I'm gonna something a little bit more tangible and give an example of the angry parent, the angry adult. Okay, barring I've met adults who have a lot of flawed midos. It's very clear, the fact that there's no embarrassment whatsoever in the way that they act, short fused, hot temper, no problem to embarrass their kids in public, like people who just have character deficiencies. And when a kid will say, "Okay, so how am I supposed to relate to my mother, my father?" and they're messed up, and you can see that they're messed up. I've had my fair interactions with parents, and there's certain parents who just like, wow, like, the kid has it very, very challenging. So, how does one get to that point? It doesn't happen in a vacuum. The way that the advice, which I think is the right advice, is that you have to not be able to hold them accountable. Because at a certain point, when someone's in their 50s and they're living their entire life a certain way, they become concrete in their character and they can't change that really. You can't expect somebody who's been having anger issues and they don't even, if you were to go ask them and say, "Hey, do you think you have a short fuse?" Well, me, no, blah, blah, blah. It's the other person's fault, right? If they didn't do certain things, I wouldn't get upset. You love that line, right? It's everyone else's fault. You expect somebody who's been living with anger issues for 40 years to turn it around. Someone who acts immature, someone who absolves themselves of responsibilities, and they're in their 40s and 50s and magically it's supposed to go away. So you can't hold them responsible because they're so past the realm of working on themselves. I can't hold them responsible. You can't hold them responsible, but you know who can hold them responsible is Hashem, the ultimate judge, the Dayan Emes. When they get to Shemayim and they go review their 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old self who rejected because they were too lazy to accept any musr, right? Because we talked about the Leitzan, right? If someone gives a speech, you're on a Shabbaton, you hear a powerful speech about how you need to correct your ways, and you're sitting there and you got that look, my favorite look on a kid's face when they're getting clocked, the clocked face, and they're living it right in that moment. And then you give it 20 minutes afterwards, and they're right back to where they were. They have a window of opportunity here to be able to actually enact, to change themselves, to do something productive. And what's really, really crazy, right, is that if they don't, then they become this person. Become the person they're going to be in the future. So I'm not in a position to judge because where they are right now, it's not fair to hold them accountable for what they didn't do when they were 16 years old. And again, stemmed from laziness. Whether it's physical, I don't want to get off the couch. We're talking about emotional laziness. When you hear a speech that clocks you and it's a calling and you do nothing about it, you don't buy a journal, a book like Hayasuda does and start documenting things and open notes in your phone and start writing things down and monitoring your behavior and taking proactive steps to get out of it because there's a lethargicness there. I'm lazy. I don't want to work on this because it's so exhausting. So there's ones who like every time you come with a deep conversation or like a deep question, their minds boom off right away. Boom. Walls up, danger alert. Someone's asking me to think a little bit deep, and they're out 5 seconds later. And when a person, because of their laziness, passes up on those things, slowly, slowly, like a disease that slowly eats away at the fabric of their entire being, until they get to a point where they're past the ability to be able to help. So he's talking about someone who's mixing up themselves in halacha because they were lax in being diligent in their learning. But let's talk about character development. It's the same principles apply. When a person is lazy in terms of their avoda to work and correct themselves, what ends up happening, right? They end up turning into that person. And if you think that the end will be destruction, what does that mean? It means that after Me'av Esrim, when you face Hashem, He's going to look at you and say, "What? Like, it was beyond your capability." Let's not look at the 50-year-old self. Let's go all the way back to 15, 16, 17, where you trapped yourself by passing yourself up. Let's go to the comment box here. We generated some action. You know if it's right or wrong. Okay, how do you know? Because everybody can see and recognize bad midos. It's not our job to judge our parents, and nor should we, right? We're not supposed to be there, and God forbid, it would be very, very chutzpahdik and probably usser outright to try to reprimand your parents for their behavior. That's never your role ever. But we are people with brains and we understand what good mitos look like and what not good mitos look like. Now, granted, you should be dam l'kaf if they're acting in a way and you don't know the whole story. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt. They had a hard day, they were whatever it is. But every single one of us has the wherewithal to be able to identify good and bad. That's not proper mitos. Maybe you're having a bad day, so maybe I won't hold you to it. But in my head, I can identify that's not the way you should be treating people, and that's you shouldn't be talking to someone that way, even if I'm your kid. Um, do you do so much for people and most of them don't take what do you mean? Shiak, what's the context there?
Like you were saying how like for they're like clocked in the moment and then 20 minutes later they're like back to where they were like before that.
Right,
So
right.
you're saying like you do so much for like everyone trying to put it like giving them opportunities and they just like so many of them just don't take it.
You're saying me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
Yeah, but my job is not the production. It's my my job is to try to use my skills to try to give opportunities out. You know, Hashem's giving me that opportunity, but what they do with it, they're not doing it for me. You know, I'm not disappointed because like, you know, hey, I gave a speech. Why didn't you, you know? To me, I'm looking at it more bird's eye view. Whoever the messenger was, you had an opportunity to grow. My heart goes out for the fact that you passed up on that opportunity. I don't take it personally. I'm just it's so sad because at the end of the day, I mentioned it, I think, towards the beginning, in one of the beginning chapters. I think Hashem won't leave somebody hanging. You're going to interact with somebody in your life who's going to give you the ability to change your life. Everyone's going to bump into someone. There's going to be some Chabad rabbi in some random town, some Jew on an airplane. You're always going to have the opportunity where there's an opening of the Yetzer Tov inside of you that says, I should do something. At that moment, what you decide to do with that is entirely up to you. But that's who you are. That defines you as a person, as your character. That's what's going to be the difference between those who succeed in life and who don't, and those who heed the message. I mean, I'm sitting surrounded by people who are, you know, case in point of that exact thing. What can you notice difference about your guys' journeys than everybody else? Right? You're sitting here writing notes. It's a Monday night. You're getting nothing by being here other than the opportunity to be able to, you know what I mean? I'm saying like this, I'm not giving you a college credit over here. I'm not paying you money. Um, yeah, I mean, uh, yeah, sometimes you can weed out, you can glean from any sort of statement what's right and what's wrong, but so I'm saying I'm reading a direct message if anyone's wondering what I'm talking about here. Um, But yeah, I mean, listen, no one's all good or no one's all evil. People, every single person, even if they have a horrible character, you know, it doesn't mean that they haven't lived a life that has experience. And there's things out there that are of value. Um, but to note them, you know, making an observation and judgment are two different things, right? To judge favorably, we're supposed to judge. We're supposed to judge favorably, but you can make observations, right? If someone is acting or saying things that are right or wrong, you know, it's not, you should have a moral compass. I know what's right. I know what's wrong. Maybe I don't fully understand what they're saying. You want to give the benefit of the doubt, but there's nothing wrong with even identifying something that's wrong, even if it is your parents, because at the end of the day, you're not responsible for them, you're responsible for you. And if you can't differentiate between right and wrong, what's good and bad, and use it as motivation to do good in the future, then you're gonna also miss that opportunity. you know? Oh my God, a lot of direct messages. What is it? Is that meant to be direct? Can I answer that publicly? Okay. So the question came, what's the proper way to tell someone they're doing something wrong without putting them up against the wall? Now, the first question is why are we like who are we to be telling someone they're doing something wrong, right? Let's assume, okay, because again, like the dynamic of the relationship. Am I a peer to them? Am I, am I an advisor, a teacher, a rebbe? Am I the parent and I have an obligation to guide? Versus, is this my friend? Are they interested in what I have to say? Or is this going upwards? Like I need to give feedback because the approach to each one of the dynamics of those relationships will obviously be different. So, um, which context do you want me to respond in? Like, what's the nature of the relationship?
Not like friend, like for you example, if like not just, like people don't ask you, but like you see something wrong, like do you say something or you just like how do you like confront that?
Me to an NCS wire, like somebody who's like in the
Yeah.
totem pole of respect, let's just say.
Yeah.
So and somebody who's not asking advice, or someone who didn't like I just proactively
Yeah,
see
like you know that if you go to them that they're gonna put up a wall and like completely tune you out. Is it worth it to even try or just like leave
it's
it?
very, very tricky. You know, there's a general principle you can't help people who don't want to be helped. It's very hard. It's a big struggle to, at least for me personally, maybe Tamar can relate, and actually maybe any of you can relate, you know, where it's like is the right thing to say something or not, right? Am I crossing a line or a boundary? You know, you care a lot, but you also want to make sure that you're not stepping over that line. So it's a really hard thing to navigate. I think every situation is kind of different. What I would try to do is try to get into conversation that would lead, right? I can try to steer a conversation to a point where, I'm able to find a way to get to that topic, and then maybe they'll inquire, or they'll say something. I'll say, well, I mean, you're not asking my opinion, so whatever. Oh, what's your opinion? You know what I mean? Like, try to get it
Yeah.
without being like, in a direct with them. But it'd have to be something where it's like, oh my God, they're in serious danger. You know what I mean? I guess it's not true. If someone gets involved, if someone starts dating a non-Jew, then I do get in there, and I'm willing to risk losing the relationship over that because, um, that's something that I think is dire enough for that person's soul that it's not worth it to sit back on that. Yeah, Das.
Um, so you should only give advice if it's needed. Like I was someone was like talking to me the other day and I got like so mad about it. And then now like it's like 3 days later and like I really took it as like muster. Like I've been thinking about it a lot and I really think that like it helped.
It's not if it's needed. It's if they'll be makabel. If they'll accept what you're saying.
Uh,
That's the whole thing. It's always good to give advice anytime you see something wrong. The question is that because we live in a generation of people who are so wildly insecure, nobody enjoys being spoken to. Everybody is going to be defensive about anything. It takes a very special person to be
so
like,
was I, but
"Stuff
then
like
I
that."
took it as muster. Then I
Fortunate you're the bigger person. Fortunate for them, I've said things to people, and to this day they hate me because I decided to say something. I made a comment to somebody, and literally to this day, I know of NC Swires who literally from that time on has never spoken to me ever again because of it. So I like it's not so much of, hey, something needs to be said. Why does it need to be me?
it's about the
It's
person.
about the person. Can
Okay.
I relay over this information to them? Can I get there in a way that they'll accept it, where their guards are down? Now, if you get into one of those conversations where there's a connection, it's a DMC, they are getting vulnerable, their guard is down, and you're able to relate over. That's the ideal. But it's very hard to get there because again, we live in a very insecure generation, and who wants to be told that a lot of kids feel like their whole life they're being told that they're doing things wrong. So it's a very tricky thing to navigate. You got to feel it out. But it's
Right.
it's more about them than it is about you. If you have the ability to do and say something, you for sure do it. And then there's the extreme reverse. Those awful girls are just like, yeah, but it's true. Like they go around saying horrible things to people, like hiding behind the fact that, well, it's true. She is a selfish piece of, it's like, If you think that, you don't have to go around and saying it. Yeah, but then who's going to tell her? Those people
Right.
never like hearing it themselves, also. It's the irony.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, anyway, okay, so let's uh yeah, okay. So he's going to continue here. Let's do one more paragraph and then we'll stop. So bottom of page 39. We see here with our own eyes on numerous occasions how a person is already cognized of his own duty and who already knows what is appropriate and for the salvation of his soul and what is the obligation to his creator can nevertheless neglect his duty through not because of lack of awareness of his obligation. I'm sorry, though not because of lack of awareness of his obligation for any other reason. Rather, his lethargic indolence dominates him. He's given himself, he's conditioned himself to be this person who is, again, being lethargic is a midah. If a person swims in it and waters it and gives it sunlight and just bathes in it, eventually it becomes who you are. It's your second nature. And this is what it said to him. I'll eat a little bit, I'll sleep a bit, it's hard for me to get out of the house. I took my shirt off. How can I put it back on? It's very hot outside. It's very chilly, or it's rainy, or blah blah blah. There's kids in Jewish Academy that I encounter that like everything in the entire world. There's an excuse for everything in the entire world. He's suggesting that the root of this is laziness. You're just someone who's always looking to just not be able to do whatever needs to be done. And it is such an unattractive midah. It is such an unattractive midah. I'm telling you, ambition is something that's very attractive to people. People who are ambitious, who have dreams, hopes, who are eager to get somewhere in life. Those other people are so ugh. You don't want to be friends with them. You certainly don't want to be in a relationship with them. But these are like some of the worst people. And all of a sudden, and you're gonna just, how are you gonna be a good husband or wife, a good parent, if you're just always just trying to absolve yourself of doing anything? For all of the pretexts and excuses at the mouth of the indolent person is filled. But the outcome is the same. The Torah is neglected, the divine service is idle, and the man has abandoned his creator. And this is what Shlomo said in Koheles: through indolence, the ceiling will cave in, and through inferior handiwork, the house will leak. I don't know of any, like when you meet a kid who's totally blah, I do interviews and a kid's sitting there and you're just like, wow, so tell me about yourself. I don't know. What are you passionate about? What do you mean? What do I mean? I asked you what you're passionate about. What do you mean? So those are the type of people you very rarely see them become successful in life in general. Certainly not in terms of their Yiddishkeit. How can they be? They're so like, ugh. So again, making the parallel to Chavis al Talmidim, because then in chapter 6 it dives into the ego and how a person, right? And so he's going to talk about it now as well, how a person will always try to, they're going to be complex. The laziness must be protected. Their lethargicness needs to be protected. For every 15-year-old who's an atheist, I love this. You ever met a 15-year-old atheist who's never read a book on the cosmos ever? Somehow God, the most complex being out there in the entire world, and you at 15 years old figured out that there's no God. It's unbelievable. And how many social Darwinism books have you read? Zero? So nice. Where's that coming from? Where did you came to this conclusion that God doesn't exist? Beautiful. How'd you come to that conclusion when you're 15 years old? People like to create alternate reality. They'll go so far out of their way to create, logical proofs for this and that as to why they're not doing the things that they're doing. Ultimately, so they don't feel bad about themselves when they're laying in bed at night, because nobody likes that. Nobody wants that whatsoever. And talk about that, how the person will, in their ridiculousness, is going to come up with, proofs and logics to reaffirm, right, that there's always the reason. Why can't you come once a week to learn and earn? Why can't you come? I have homework. Every single kid in Learn and Earn has homework. And you know what? It's usually the kids that are coming and serious about their learning who usually do well in their academics as well. Not always, but for the most part, because they have discipline and good work ethic. So they probably are doing better in school than you, and yet you have homework. There's always a reason why a person can't come through in the ways that they need to come through for themselves. But we'll continue with that next week. We'll dive into to that and finish up the chapter with Zriz. Okay. Any final questions, comments, concerns, suggestions?
Yeah.
To make Raquel's name next week? Yes.
Can you can you repeat what you said about what like the fleet as a deer means?
Like running away, like a deer, like he's eating grass, and then he hears a crunch in the grass, and he goes, and the hunter's like, "Don't move," and then the deer goes,
Yeah.
Sure.
Also, can you re-explain the quote from that you said in the beginning that was like, wow, like underlining it.
Zrizim, the Gemara says, Zrizim makdimin lemitzvos,
Yeah.
that a person is the way to fulfill, the way in which one fulfills the mitzvahs is through the medium of Zrizus. As in, that is the way Hashem wants you. Every mitzvah we have, think about it. Mode'ani lefanech. What's the first in your day? The first mitzvah. Right? Yiskaber kari, that a person's supposed to rise out of bed like a lion. Acting with zrizas. Boom. Act right away. Everything that you do, there's a mitzvah, I do it right away. Boom. Right? Why do you think people daven Nate? So the second the sun appears about, because I want to do things with zrizas, with alacrity. Every mitzvah. It's the end of one holiday, right? The end of Yom Kippur. Month of Yom Kippur, we start building the sun. Everything that we're meant to do in terms of fulfilling the mitzvahs is meant to be done with zrizas. That's the way Hashem intended it to be.
Recording in progress.
Alrighty. Now I'll stop the recording and we'll do the random irrelevant questions that Surah Chaya has. Okay? Shkayach everyone.